I want to open with introduction because this is our first class. First of all, I want to welcome everyone for coming tonight. It's a great honor for me to be able to share some Divrei Torah with you. I know that time is always at a premium for all of us. And so for you to take the time to come in, to sit for this hour, to be able to think together, to explore together, to contemplate important elements of our lives together is a great honor for me and it's a great privilege. And I take it that way very seriously. A bit about what this class is going to be, is set up to be. About a year ago, I put out a series of 9 2-minute videos called Perspectives. You may have seen it, may not have seen it, but put out these videos. And each one dealt with one concept, either in Torah or in life in general. So it either dealt with, for example, charity, life, mitzvot, sin, and so on. Yes? One-word things, these one-word things sometimes have like real major. And I was concerned about doing this because how do you deal with sin in 2 minutes? How do you deal with life in 2 minutes? It's a little bit pretentious to imagine that you can deal with these things. But the point was not to deal with the concept entirely. The reason it's called Perspectives is because it's meant just to give a perspective on it. And the perspective always came from Torah. Although there are no footnotes to those videos, not a list of sources, it's just me speaking and you're hoping that what I'm saying is coming from Torah. And what I did last year during this series, which was originally on Wednesday nights, we moved to Mondays, is a series called Misconceptions. The Misconceptions series dealt with misconceptions in Judaism. And these misconceptions, these topics were given to me by the students, by the people that were attending class, and we went through 14 different misconceptions. This series is Perspectives, like my videos, and what I'm intending to do is to take those 2-minute videos and expand them into an hour with elaboration and sources. Yeah? Some of the issues that we will talk about over the course of this series are not in those videos, like tonight's. I didn't do one on love, but tonight we're going to talk about love. All of them will be presented from a Torah perspective. And I highlight and underline and stress a Torah perspective. I am not in any way presenting here the emphatic answer and definition to end all questions on any of these topics. I am presenting a Torah perspective that will be sourced and hopefully substantiated and hopefully give us a framework and lens through which we can understand these issues that are at the core of our lives, both as human beings and as Jews. Yeah? So that's our goal, that's our aim. Please God we'll succeed, but you'll be the judge of that. Tonight's subject is love. And it's difficult one not only to deal with in 2 minutes, not an hour, in a lifetime. How do you define it? How do you write a book about it? How do you write 10 books about love? What I hope to do tonight is again to give a perspective on it. And to look at it in a way that reframes the way we tend to look at it in Western culture. Because the way that we tend to look at love in general in Western culture is highly romantic, right? Coming from Roman, yeah, which is essentially the fathers of the Western world. So we tend to look at love very much in emotional ways. Many of us are taught to look at love almost exclusively in emotional terms. If I feel it, I have it. If I don't, I don't. We worry when we don't necessarily have a feeling that we call love. And the question is, what does one do if that feeling is not present? The question is, what does one do when that feeling is present? Is the feeling that we feel and call love, love, genuinely, at least as far as the Torah is concerned. And so what we will do in terms of our study and this examination of sources, to look when in the Torah the term is used. One thing that we can recognize right away is that there are no alternatives in the Hebrew language for the word that we use for love, which is what, of course? Ahava, right? Or ahev, aleph, he, bet. So you either love or you don't. There is no like in Hebrew. You can't say that you like something in Hebrew. You will hope that the context in which you're speaking in modern terms will indicate that when you use the word ahav, you're just liking, not loving. But Facebook had a big problem with this, and they realized that you can't ohev something, you have to like it. So taseh like. But there's no ahav, because it throws the whole thing off. Major issue. The Torah is very passionate, perhaps. Yeah? There's no dislike. There's maybe lo ohev or there's soneh, which would mean hate. But to say, I just like something, you are hard pressed in the Hebrew language to find any means to do so. Wonder why, right? We have to think about why. I thought a good place to start would be to examine the first time that we see the word love used in Torah. It's very interesting. The first time that we see the word love used in Torah is between Yitzhak and Rivka. Takes us to our second set of matriarch and patriarchs, right? To find the word love. I don't know that we've ever paid attention to this. The Torah doesn't use the word until then. So anytime that you find in Torah the first place that a word is used is very telling. Because first of all it says it didn't find a reason to use it beforehand. And here it's the primal source. So what's different about Yitzhak and Rivka from Abraham and Sarah, Adam and Ahava, any of the other couples that we had before? What about parental love, right? It's not the only kind of love that we've got. We've got parent-child love, we've got friendship, we've got all of these kinds of things. Only time that we see it first is by Yitzhak and Rivka. Well, we know that there's something very unique about Yitzhak and Rivka against the backdrop of those that came before them, certainly against the backdrop of Abraham and Sarah, and that is that they were exclusive. Abraham, when he is told by his wife Sarah, look, we're having trouble conceiving here, why don't you go and take Hagar, my maidservant, and try and build a family with her? Abraham's response is, fantastic idea. I think that's what we'll do. The Hakamim paint a picture of Abraham that is not far off from the text, in where Abraham fails even to see the beauty of his wife until he realizes that there are going to be logistical problems with her physical appearance. You're not even paying attention, really, to Sarah and her beauty. So it says that when he goes down to Egypt and he realizes, oh my goodness, people might perceive you as an attractive woman. They're going to kill me and take you. Oh, he's very concerned about this happening, and he says, please say that you're my sister, because in the old world, protocol was that if you have a sister with you, you court the sister and bestow gifts onto the brother in the family. If it's a wife and you are lacking scruples, you kill the husband and you take the wife. That was protocol. Abraham knew this. Everybody knew this. So the Hachamim say, you didn't see her beforehand? It's only now that you realize that she was a beautiful woman? Not so with Yitzhak and Rivka. So the first time that we see love is when Yitzhak meets her. Take a look at the sources. That's number 1 in the source sheet. Vayibi'eha, so Yitzhak meets Rivka. She's brought over by his father's butler. He brings her over on the camel. She comes right, falls off the camel. She gets off the camel. She doesn't even wait till the camel collapses. If Have you ever ridden a camel? I imagine everybody's ridden a camel in the room. Wow. There are prerequisites to this class. Didn't anybody tell you that was tonight's? So, the camel has to collapse, basically, because you're sitting 40 stories up in the air. She didn't wait for the camel to, she gets off, jumps off camel, runs to, she sees Yitzhak, Yitzhak sees her, and it's what we might call love at first sight. Except that the Torah doesn't say that he loved her at first sight. What it says is, Vayivieha Yitzhak ha'ohel Sarah imo. Yitzhak said, why don't we go into my mother's quarters? And he takes Rivka into his mother's room. Basically her tent, right? She had her tent in her quarters, right, where she lived. Takes her into there. Vayikach Rivka, and he took Rivka, and by bringing her there, Vatehi lo leisha, and she became a wife to him. And then, Vaye'ehaveha, and he loved her. So this process happens before he loves her. He doesn't love her when she comes off of the camel. He loves her after he brings her into his mother's home, right, his mother's abode. She agrees to become his wife, right? He takes her as a wife, Vaye'ehaveha, and he loves her. First time we see the word in the Torah. So something happens here. Now, the pasuk doesn't end with Vaye'ehaveha, it ends with the following. Vayinahem Yitzhak aharei mo. And Yitzhak was consoled over the death of his mother. Right? Western mind, problem here. Freudian issues. Yes? What happened was, it's his wife, it's not his mother. Yeah. The Talmud says explicitly that a person is not consoled over his mother, or leaving his mother, or losing his mother, until he marries. So there's something about the female in a man's life, right? That's the perspective that the Torah is looking at, right? That brings a component of relationship into one's life, right? That one originally learned in terms of mother. So what the pasuk is doing indirectly is teaching love based on the relationship that Yitzhak has with his wife vis-a-vis his relationship with his mother. You following? Yes? It's exactly what happens. What do we know about that relationship? The relationship between Sarah and Yitzhak. She was completely dedicated to this child. First of all, she doesn't have this child until very late in life. Yeah? She insists that Avraham has to do everything that he does to ensure the safety of this child. So it's not just that Sarah loves Yitzhak emotionally. Sarah is committed to doing whatever she must do for the benefit of that child, that child should grow up strong and intact and full and whole. One of the things that she does is what? She insists that Abraham's other son has to leave. She said, look, and this is, it couldn't have been an easy conversation for her to have. She had a heart. She was a sensitive person. And yet she musters enough strength to go to her husband and say, this son, your first son, that I know you love. And we know that Abraham has very strong feelings about Ishmael. She says, he cannot stay around my son Isaac. I'm very concerned about the influence that he's going to have on him. He needs to go away. And Abraham turns to God and says, did you hear what she just said? She wants me to send Ishmael away. Could you please? And all he gets from God is, whatever she tells you, do what she says. Yeah, so he's got to send Ishmael away. Sarah's committed to the welfare of her son. You think Yitzhak doesn't know that? You think Yitzhak doesn't understand that is love? That the experience of someone being committed to your welfare, prepared to do difficult things, say difficult things, engage in difficult internal situations, to make sure that you, the one that I love, will be okay and your ultimate good will be achieved, that's love. So Yitzhak loses his mother. So it's not just he lost his mother and there was a fundamental loss in his life because she was the only one who loved him. It's not that Avraham didn't love Yitzhak. Of course he loved Yitzhak. But Avraham wasn't necessarily taught love in the way that Sarah understood. What was the name of Avraham's mother? Yeah, it's not mentioned in the entire Torah. There is a tradition that we have that her name was Amtalai Bat Karnevo, that the Achamim have to insert. Not a mention in the entire Torah about the mother of the patriarch of our entire people. Doesn't exist for all intents and purposes. His father we know. The father's Terach. We mentioned Terach on Pesach. Terach, Avi Avraham, Avi Nahor, right? He was the one, not a mention. Ever notice that? Usually not. It's not mentioned. There's something missing. When it comes to Rivka, what does Yitzhak look? If he's looking for a companion in life, he's looking for love. And when he's looking for love, he's not looking for an emotion. It's very staid. This is not love at first sight, per se. The Vaye'ehaveha doesn't happen the first time that he sees her. What he does is he brings her into his mother's tent. He takes her as a wife. He sees that there is quality there that works in terms of the relation. Vaye'ehaveha. Vaye'ehaveha means he loves her, but it means that he is committed now to doing in his life what is necessary to support this person that he's taken into his home for her ultimate good. And we see that manifest. So what I am suggesting is that love, first and foremost, as far as Torah is concerned, is not emotion. It is action. It is effort. It is invariably commitment of one person to support and cultivate the good of another to its furthest extent. That is not to say that it doesn't include emotion. And more often than not, when one does commit to living that way for another individual, there is emotion that accompanies it. But we make a big mistake when we think that what we call falling in love is love. It may be a nice precursor for love, but it's not love. Because what happens when one falls in love is that it's a drop of boundaries between identities. It is a perception that all of the world is beautiful and whole and everything is answered and all of the problems are solved and God is in his heaven and the birds are chirping and so on and so forth and my life can go on without any problems. We can ride off into the sunset and live happily ever after. And then the month passes by and you realize whatever happened to the entire thing. You know, boundaries start snapping back into place. You suddenly realize that they don't love every single thing that you do. They may keep the top of the toothpaste off, which drives you nuts. You know, this kind of thing. Yeah, which wreaks havoc on relationships. And what we realize is that it's not love, because falling in love essentially is a melding of two distinct identities into a mash of not even one. It's a beautiful feeling, don't get me wrong. But it isn't what the Torah is talking about when it uses the word ahav. Yeah? Not infatuation. It may be a nice precursor to real love if one can properly move beyond the initial feelings. But it isn't what we mean when we say love, as far as the Torah is concerned. The first place it is presented in the Torah is in this context. And where we recognize that there is action, effort, commitment, and dedication of one individual to another, and vice versa. This is only the beginning. This is the base. Right? We have to build from here. But this is the initial element. So Yitzhak loves Rivka once he's brought her in, once she has agreed to be his wife, once he realizes that she can be in his life some version of what it is that his mother gave him. Not to replace his mother, but allows for him to be consoled over the loss of his mother because he finds love in this world again. Different love. Spousal love. Not maternal love. But love in the sense that someone in this world is committed to doing for him what is necessary for him to be able to grow spiritually, psychologically, in maturity and so on. And he is committed to do so for her. So the next thing that we see between the two of them is the fact that they can't have children, like the parents. But a very different approach to the problem of having children. Rivka doesn't suggest to Yitzhak, why don't you take my maidservant and have kids? Not even a suggestion. Yitzhak doesn't even bring such a thing up. It doesn't cross his mind that this should be a possibility. So when they are not able to have children, what it says in number 3 is, Vayertar Yitzhak ladonai lenochach ishto. What do they pray. Abraham and Sarah didn't do this. Doesn't tell them that we did. We're not told that they did this. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but for whatever reason, it's not presented in Torah. There is a logistical solution for Abraham and Sarah. For Yitzhak and Rivka, this is the only way we're going to have kids. Me and you. And the only thing that we can do, therefore, is to turn to God and say, we've got a problem on our own. We're looking to you to help us. So what it says is that he prays to God, beseeches God, opposite his wife. Nochach means literally, sits opposite her. So what does it mean that he's sitting opposite her? They're doing this together. He's not going off to shul and in his Shemona Esrei saying, please God help me out. This is a mutual endeavor. You hear? This is Yitzhak, Rivka, we've got to work on this today. This is what we have to speak mutually to God. It's the most unbelievable pasuk. We read through this every year, like we don't even pay attention to what it's telling us. The beautiful humanity, commitment, relationship that it's presenting to us. So he's sitting opposite Rivka, she's sitting opposite him, right? Why? Kazakarahi and Vayater lo Adonai. God turned to them. They turned to him. He turned to them. But Rivka, and she conceived. You see, though, the massive commitment, dedication. Yeah. So there's a beautiful gloss of the Hachamim on this whole episode. They don't miss it. And what they say in number 4 is, sorry, that some I don't have English for. They quote the pasuk. Lenochach ishto. What does it mean that he sat opposite his wife? Say the Hachamim. Melamed teaches us Shaya Yitzhak shatuach kan, that Yitzhak was bowing in this corner. V'hishtu hakan, and she was bowing in the other corner opposite. Ve'omer, and they were saying, Rebono she'olam, Master of the universe, Kol banim she'ata noten li, any child that you give me, yiyu min hatzadeket hazo, let them come from this righteous woman. How do you read that and you don't get choked up over the beauty of love that is between these two? I don't want any life that I bring into this world should be the product of this relationship, nothing else. It's not a logistical thing that I'm asking you for here. I don't want progeny to be able to develop my DNA. I want a product of this loving relationship, only from this tzaddiket. Look, unbelievably beautiful. You think the Hachamim didn't realize the light that it puts Abraham in when they write this? Of course they realized. But that's okay. That's why there are developments in generations. Avhi Amra, she said the same thing. Kol banim she'atati li, yu min hatzadik hazeh. Let them only come from this righteous man. That is love. So the fact that you commit your life, that one commits one's life to living in this way. Yeah, but what happens if you don't get the kids? I'm sorry, these are tough things. But they are our life. They are the core of our being. And so therefore there are going to be things that we discuss. I'm telling you from now, not just tonight. There are going to be things that we discuss that we're either going to talk about or we're not going to talk about. But I'm going to talk about them, so you can choose. But you don't deal with these things without pulling them out and looking at them. So the alternative for Yitzhak and Rivka was, what happens if they don't get answered? Or if God's answer is no? There's not some primal drive to look logistically. My father did it. Love is invariably effort, commitment, dedication, exertion, and allowing oneself or pushing oneself to do more or over what one's natural inclination is to do. Falling in love is a biological trick. Real love is invariably effort. It is a commitment to dedicating oneself, to committing to a life with somebody, to bettering someone, to opening oneself to grow in the context of a relationship with another person. That is the meaning of Ahava. And so we begin this way. But that means that love always will include with it action. In fact, it will more often than not be defined in terms of action. And the best way that we see this is with God, because we use love in connection with God all the time. Talk about Him loving us and us loving Him. And the mistake that people make is they think that when God says to us, "Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha," which we say every single day, twice a day in the Kriyat Shema, and you shall love the Lord your God, that God is commanding us to have an emotion. And people ask me this over the last 20 years, all the time. Rabbi, how could God command us to have an emotion? And my response more often than not is, He's not commanding us to have an emotion. He's commanding us to engage in what we call love. And so immediately after that, it talks about mitzvot. It doesn't say, now let me explain to you what it feels like to be in love. Your heart's aflutter and your tummy gets all, it doesn't talk about that. It just says, Ve'avtat Adonai Elohecha, right? Ve'hayim shamot tishmeu mitzvotai, right? Keep what I'm commanding you today. Why am I commanding you? It's for you. You think I need these commandments? I mean, you think that I actually get a kick out of you putting these leather straps on your arm? I'm God, right? We'll get into that when we talk about mitzvot. But the development of love is deed, and we know this with regards to God for one major reason. God has no emotions. This usually is where people get very uncomfortable. Right? It's okay to talk about God as having emotions most of the time, as long as we know when we do so that we're lying, and that it's for our psychology that we do it. God does not have emotions. God, the same way, does not have hands, feet, face, ears, eyes, does not have emotions. Where do our emotions come from? This is not a trick question. Our brain. Right? There are chemicals, neurons that fire, that create emotion. Yeah? I'm not trying to be reductionist about it, but bottom line is you need one, a brain, in order to be able to have emotion. God doesn't have a brain. Yeah? He doesn't need one. He doesn't have emotion. He doesn't change. He just is. Him. So when I talk about love in terms of an emotion, yeah, I'm not really talking about God as feeling anything. He's not human. So what do I mean when I use all of these things? I talk about God as being happy, God as being angry, God as being loving, God as being not loving. What am I mean? What am I trying to do? Well, what do I mean when I say His face? I know that I'm not talking about an actual face, but it's used. He uses it in the Torah, right? And I turn my face to you. My eyes are upon the land from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. My ears have heard, and so on and so forth, right? Or worse, let me go down and see, which we'll be reading shortly, yeah? This week, as a matter of fact. Yes, these are all borrowed terms. It's what we call borrowed terms. We borrow them in order for us to be able to relate to very abstract situations. So when we talk about God's hand, what are we thinking? Ours. What do we do with our hands? So an outstretched arm. Yeah, God goes into Egypt and so on. So yes, that's the statue of Ramses in the British Museum. You know the statue I'm talking about. Get to the British Museum. Take a look. Have you been to the British Museum? Have you seen the ram? No camels, no British Museum. All right. So there's statues of Ramses with his arm out like this. Yeah? That's called Zroa Netuya. That was a sign of power. It was a sign of Ramses' strength over all of the other countries and statehoods and whatnot, city-states, that he had full control over. So God comes along and says, I'm stretching out my arm against you, Ramses. That means something, right? God has no arm. But Ramses did. And he thought immediately of what that means. So God says, what do you do when you want to show strength and power? Don't you stretch your arm out, right? Yeah, mine too. I'm stretching my arm out. How does it feel when one is on the other side of love? Well, we have to think about that. How does it feel when one is on the other side of love? One feels supported, cared for, embraced, safe, warm, what have you. So when God says to us, you're feeling warm, embraced, the world is going your way, things are, and so on and so forth. What do you call? You call that love. Yes, that's what I'm doing to you. I'm loving you. That's the experience about having such a connection with God. We call that love. Yeah? And so too, vice versa. But when we understand that God doesn't have emotions, we're not talking about God feeling something. What we're talking about is God being something in our lives. And the experience of God being that in our lives is what we call love. It's what we would call if another person was acting in that way. But it is action. It is a question of how we act in such a relationship. That's called Ahava. Yes? And so we always find that whenever it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks about this. Bilam, he was on his way to destroy you. Bilam was a prophet among the non-Jews of the world, the Gentiles of the world, had very good track record in terms of his blessings and curses. He was, pretty on everything that he did. He was hired by the king of Moab to curse the people of Israel. And what God says later on, Moshe, essentially, before he dies, he tells the people, he says, God was not interested in allowing for Bilam and his curses to follow through. Why? Because I love you. Is he talking about a feeling? Yes, we will relate to it as that. But it wasn't just a feeling. I did something. I protected you. I made sure that you weren't harmed. Because I love you. That is what indicates the love. Not the feeling, the action. It's always the action. It's always what is one doing in order to be able to cultivate that relationship and that connection. And so we see this taken sorry. So we see this, for example, the way that the Rambam puts it. If you take a look in, where are we? Which number is this? Number 9. Here he's talking about our love for God, the Rambam. And he says, how does one love God? He goes, the way to love God, he says, the way to love God is first of all to get to know Him. Because how are you supposed to love somebody that you don't know? You need to have some way of getting to know God, and because God isn't physical and He doesn't have a manifestation outside of the world that He created, it's an issue. When you've got a person, get to know the person. You decide whether you want to love the person, not love the person. But God, you've got to first get to know God as God. And so what you do, because you don't have direct access, we never have direct access to God. That's an important point. No direct access. The only access that we have to God is through His expressions. And the best of His expressions is, of course, creation itself. It's His greatest artwork. His greatest piece of work. And so what Harambam says, if you want to love God, you've got to first get to know Him. How do you get to know Him? Study the world. Take a look. All right, what does he say? And he underlines. He says, how do you love Him? When a person contemplates God's actions and His creations, the wondrous and great creations, and you see the wisdom behind them. It has no end. It's like you keep discovering more and more. It's unbelievable. You immediately love. Now, you will think, okay, miyad ohev, if I stop there, I'm talking about an emotion, right? I feel all inspired inside. I feel wonderful about the creator of all of this stuff. I love God. But that's not where it stops. Miyad ohev, you immediately love. Shabeach, fa'er, mit'avet ha'ava gdola, leda Hashem hagadol. You immediately go into praise. You want to show Him that you love Him, that is a natural human response. When you do recognize that this is a person or an entity, a being that I want to get to know or connect to, my first instinct is tell them, I saw what you did, it's phenomenal. Don't we have that feeling? That's the initial element of love. I mean, it goes awry when it's not allowed to be able to come into fruition, because this is what happens when you have crazy psycho fans of artists. No? Don't look at me like that. You know what I'm talking about. All right, psycho fan. Where you have an artist that you love, yeah? For whatever. A musician, an author, somebody that you love. What do you mean you love? Chances are you never met that person. How do you know that person? You know that person by what they put out into the world, how they express themselves in the world. You recognize the person by experiencing their output. Because what they're putting out is not utilitarian, right? In the sense that it is useful for a particular purpose. It is always expressive of the individual who brought it into the world. The creativity that brought it into the world. So you hear the music of someone that moves you. What's happening is that individual, that person, has touched your life. They started it. Don't you see? They started it. They made love to you first. They started with the act of love. Because the act of creation, who are they doing this for? Some vacuum? Yes, there may be certain artists that could care less about anybody other than themselves. And guess what? You can tell that in their art. But when the person genuinely is putting out something into the world of their own, that is an act of love. It includes everything that's required. It's vulnerable. What is vulnerability? Why is vulnerability important in love? It's an essential component of love. Why? Because you have to open yourself. You have to open yourself if you're going to engage in another person's life and genuinely be engaged in that person's life. You can't engage in a person's life behind a brick wall. No? We try to all the time. It doesn't work. Let me save you the problem. It doesn't work. So it includes vulnerability. It includes self-expression. And I am giving you something from me to you. When it's done genuinely, it is an act of love. And I'll tell you, when I experienced this, I was surprised at my own reaction. But it was so clear that was, the reaction. I had to speak to a group of students in Cambridge. So, I scheduled the thing, talk. And, of course, in Cambridge is the largest collection of the Cairo Geniza. So they knew I'm coming. And they set up a whole display of, various elements of the Cairo Geniza, which was a great honor to be able to see that. Coming out of private, And, the curator's taking me around, and he shows me, there's a bill of sale signed by Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch. Wow. Hand signed. There's a ketubah between a Karaite Jew and a traditional, rabbinic Jew, and he agrees that she's not going to make her sit in a lit room on Shabbat, so on, so the whole fun, I'm going around seeing bits and bits and bits, and all of a sudden he puts a piece of paper into my hand that's in plastic. And I look down at the paper, and immediately I know the handwriting. It's Harambam's handwriting. I know his handwriting. And I say, what is this? And I'm expecting him to tell me, it was a psak din from the Bet Din, or it was a letter to somebody. He tells me it's a page of the Moreh Nevuchim. And I start crying. I'm crying now. I started crying then. Because to me, the Moreh Nevuchim is an act of love. It was Harambam showing me directly how he loves me. Because he took time. You know what this was? He didn't have a word processor, right? He's not sitting and writing on his Mac. Yeah, he's sitting quill in ink, writing out on paper. They didn't have paper. You think, he went down to Staples and he got, he used to get questions. He would write on the other side of the question and send it back because they didn't have paper. This is Harambam pouring his heart out to me. How it affected my life, how it changed my thinking. I'm holding the paper in my hands. That's an act of love. He started it. So when you experience that, you experience love. We don't realize it, and that's why it drives us crazy, and that's why you have these crazy lunatic fans, and why you have on Abbey Road, up the block from my house, crazy people that are still, walking across the zebra crossing, back and forth. They don't know what to do with themselves. They somehow have been loved so deeply by a bunch of, these four guys. What am I supposed to do? Got to get to the zebra crossing, and so it drives us mad. But this is the reason. Nobody realizes, nor does anyone really care to acknowledge that this is the reason, because it's not the feeling, it is the reality that somebody has cared enough to give of themselves and to touch your life and to make a difference in your life. And they did make a difference in people's lives. They wrote poetry and they put it to music, and you heard it, and it was something you've never heard in your life before. It changed the way that you saw the world. Can it go wrong? Of course it could go wrong. It's very dangerous. It's very powerful, and it's very dangerous. But that's love. So when you experience the creative expression of someone in the world, you are experiencing an act of love. It may be very open and not directed, but you are. And you know what your feeling is when you experience it? You want to tell them. I felt what you did, and it made a difference to me in my life. And that's why you have crazy psycho fans. Because they don't know what to do with themselves, and all they want to do is to be able to all they really want to do is be able to get to that individual and say, you made a difference in my life. But you can't, and so you end up obsessing, and you become infatuated, and you become psychotic, and so on and so forth. Yeah? Because there's no outlet, there's no way to really deal with it in any way. But that's what it is. So what Harambam is saying is, you see God's creative expression and you think for 1 minute, you're going to see that and you're going to ask, is God part of the world or not? Does he care about my life or not? It's the most stupid question that a person could possibly ask. But it's also a question that one asks when one does not know love, nor does one care to know love, or if one has closed themselves off from love. You cannot be in this world and experience the expressions of God in this world and not feel loved immediately, and therefore love. The only way to do it is to insist that it isn't love. That's some arbitrary thing. And that's what most of us do. Because it's too powerful otherwise for us to deal with. We are not ready to let ourselves in. And here lies a big issue. Falling in love is one thing. Loving is another. It is so powerful. and so much the goal and ultimate core of our lives, in which everything else fades and pales in comparison, that we are not prepared to genuinely embrace it and engage in it in its full and true sense. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is that it's not just God that we don't love. We don't love each other. We can't. We don't allow ourselves to. It's too much. But make no mistake, love is what I'm defining. It's much easier to have an emotion. That's a totally different story, to commit one's life to the spiritual growth of another person and opening oneself to genuine spiritual growth themselves. And so that's what we end up finding it to be. So it says in number 10, the Rambam continues, and it says when the Torah tells us, "Be'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha," you should love God, what essentially it's saying is, Bizman she'av adam et Adonai ahava ra'uya, when the person genuinely loves God as one is meant to love, miyad ya'aseh kol hamitzvot me'ahava. What's the next words? Immediately he will do all the mitzvot from love. Do all the mitzvot. Whatever happened to, just feeling fantastic about this relationship that you've got with God and so on and so forth. What else? The mitzvot are your capacity to engage. It's how you act with God. How else are you supposed to? You have a mitzvah. It's a fantastic opportunity. You can actually love by doing, by making effort, by engaging. What would you do if you had a person that you loved? Would you not look to see what you could do in order to be able to enhance this person's life, support this person's life, strengthen this person? So God doesn't need strength and support. It's a mode of connection. It's what it genuinely is. So there is no real love without mitzvah. There's romantic love without mitzvah, but not real love without mitzvah, as far as God is concerned. But there's mitzvah in every relationship, is there not? There's covenant and there's mitzvah in every real relationship. And so I want to bring out something that Erich Fromm writes. And by the way, if you haven't read The Art of Loving by Erich Fromm, do. And so what he says is, number 11, because love is an act of effort and consciousness and investment, he writes, and it's completely in line with everything we're saying, it is an illusion to believe that one can separate life in such a way that one is productive in the sphere of love and unproductive in all other spheres. In other words, we get love right, we get everything else wrong. Productiveness does not permit of such a division of labor. You either are productive or you're not productive, but you're not productive in love and not productive in everything else. The capacity to love demands a state of intensity, awakeness, enhanced vitality, which can only be the result of a productive and active orientation in many other spheres of life. If one is not productive in other spheres, one is not productive in love either. And what the Torah teaches us is further than that. If a person does not engage and ultimately have success in love, in the manner that we've explained it, in the relationships of one's human life, one cannot have that with God. There's no way to do that. Be a problem in all of the other relationships, but with God your love is perfect. Yeah. We always learn from our local relationships and extrapolate them to God. Always. God does the same, right? It's the way He guides us. So He'll say, my acting with you is the way a father acts with a son, or a parent acts with a child. You can relate to it that way. And so on. And so even with each other, it's a question of deed. And as he says, action and awakeness and so on and so forth. Take a look at number 13. The Rambam writes, Mitzvah al kol adam. It is a commandment on every human being. Le'ehov et kol echad ve'echad mi'Yisrael, meaning every man, the nation of Israel is to love each other. essentially what the Rambam is saying. He could leave it at that, right? Thank you, we got it. I'm supposed to love. I know what love is. I'm supposed to feel love for my nation. But that's not what he writes. He says a person has to love. Every member of Israel has to love other men. It says ve'afta l'reacha kamocha. He brings the mitzvah, and he says lefichach. Therefore, tzarich lesaper b'shibho. What does it mean? Speak in praise of your fellow Jew, your brother, your sister. Speak in their praise. Teach oneself, teach yourself to speak in praise of them in action. Think it. When you speak in praise, you got to think about, what can I praise this person about? Notice it's the exact same thing that it says about God, right? Miyad ohev, you immediately love him, and therefore you praise. This is not subjugation. It is an ability to engage and express what it is that you mean to me and how it is that I'm committed to you. So you speak in praise. Lahus al mamono, kasheru has al mamon atzmo. Careful with their money, the way that you're careful with your own. That's love. That's love. I don't remember seeing any cards, with that. You're so careful with my money. I love you. Where is that? The Rambam obviously never saw Hallmark, And you'll want for his honor the way that you care about your own dignity and honor. That's love. And he says, but God forbid that you should have somebody that finds honor in the making light of another person. Well, we won't go there. He just tags that on at the end. Yeah. Beautiful in Hebrew, because the word kavod in Hebrew, which is honor, really means weight. From kaved, gravitas. Kalon comes from the word kalon, which is belittling, comes from the word kal, which is light. So essentially what he's saying, if you gain your weight from making light of another person, he says essentially one loses his place in the world to come, which essentially is saying that a person loses an emergent life in any way. Yeah. So do you see, in closing, what this means is that if I genuinely love someone, I am willing to go through the efforts in acting in ways that I need to in order to be able to cultivate that person's best spiritual and physical existence as far as I can. And it also means that I'm going to have difficult conversations with that person. And it means that I will do difficult things in order to be able to make sure that that is taken care of. It means that I may have to say to that person, you're messing up your life, and I love you, but you can't keep doing that. And you figure out the way to say it. You never, if you love somebody, let them destroy their life unless they emphatically insist on doing so, regardless of what it is that you say or how you say it and so on. It's not true that when you love somebody, it means never having to say you're sorry. When you love somebody, it means you always have to say you're sorry. Everything matters more when you love, not less. Loving requires greater sensitivity and attention, not less. It does demand concern, focus, effort, work. But it is the greatest endeavor of our lives, bar none. The Torah holds that without question. And when it tells us love God, it never expects us to do so without first learning what love is in terms of our own human relationships. But that's what it is. It isn't just a feeling. Please, God, the feeling should come when we are willing to engage in a relationship that way. And because it is actions first and emotions second, there are situations in which we can love someone with all our heart and not like the person. We can not want to have lunch with the person, talk to the person, spend time with the person, but we will be on the next plane if they need us. You know who I'm talking about. I don't know, whatever. You know whoever that is. Yeah? We all have those people. And it's astonishing that that should be so. But it is. Real love allows for oneself to overcome the personal inclinations, right? This is whether I'm a parent, whether I'm a spouse, a lover, whatever it is. We withhold the fact that I would much rather give the child what the child is asking for, so that I can take care of my own feelings, rather than doing what the child needs in order for the child to be able to be the best person that the child can be. I will resist the laziness in my relationship with my wife, with my husband, with my boyfriend, with my girlfriend, whatever it is, and make the efforts in order to be able to show that not only do they matter to me, but their spiritual growth is a priority of my life. And how blessed are we when we have somebody who does that with us. That is what the Torah teaches us about love. It is the only real way to do it. And please God, we should merit always being able to experience it in our lives and do it and act in it in our lives, both with our fellow human beings and with God.